Welcome to the deep dive. We've got quite a stack of information here, pulled together just for you.
Yeah, definitely. Today we're digging into some excerpts from a text all about achievement, specifically chapter 2, which is titled Desire.
Right. And this material really focuses on the intense force of what it calls a burning desire.
Hmm.
It frames it as like the essential starting point for hitting big goals, even getting, riches, as the text says.
And it's not just theory, is it? There are some really vivid stories in the source material, powerful examples, and even a kind of step-by-step method.
Exactly. So our mission today in this deep dive is to unpack what really makes a burning desire different from just, wishing for something.
Okay,
We'll look at its power through these examples and kind of explore how you might apply these ideas.
sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the source kicks things off by drawing a really sharp line. It says, look, wishing, not enough.
Right.
What you need is a keen, pulsating, definite desire. That's the phrasing.
And the main story used to illustrate this is about a guy named Edwin C. Barnes.
Yes, tell us about him.
Well, the story goes, Barnes shows up in Orange, New Jersey, looked pretty rough, apparently, like he hopped off a freight train.
Okay.
But the text makes a point of saying, well, he looked like a tramp. He arrived with the thoughts of a king. He had one single driving obsession,
Which was?
to become Thomas Edison's business associate. Not just work for him, but with him.
Ah, okay. A big goal.
A huge goal. And the source really hammers this home. It wasn't a hope. It wasn't a wish. When he got there, it was a definite, all-consuming desire. It sort of overshadowed everything else for him.
And he was so focused on this one thing, he was willing to do pretty much anything to get a foot in the door.
Exactly.
Sure.
He was apparently content to start with the most menial work Edison had. Anything, as long as it felt like a step, even a tiny one, towards that ultimate goal.
So how long did that take?
That's the kicker. It took 5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
Hmm.
With no actual promises from Edison about becoming an associate, no specific encouragement on that front.
Wow.
But the text claims that in Barnes's own mind, he saw himself as Edison's partner every single minute of that time, right from day one.
That's incredible mental discipline. So what does the source say was the key to him finally, making it happen after all that time?
Well, it boils down to that initial desire, really. It led him to do several things. Choose that definite goal, put absolutely all his energy, his willpower, his effort behind it. Create a plan, even if it started simple.
Okay.
And this is crucial. He burned all bridges behind him.
Burned his bridges. What does that mean in this context?
It means he staked his entire future on getting what he wanted. He left himself no way out, no plan B, no possibility of retreat if it got tough. It was succeed or, well, just succeed.
That phrase, burning bridges, that seems like a really central theme here, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. The source brings it up again with another story, an old one, about a great warrior facing a much larger army. He sails his soldiers to the enemy's country. They unload everything. And then he gives the order to burn their own ships.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah. And then he tells his men basically, look at the ships burning. We can't leave unless we win. We have no choice now. We win or we perish. According to the story, they did. And the point the text makes is that achieving something really significant often demands that kind of mindset.
That total commitment.
A burning desire to win, coupled with cutting off any easy way back, eliminating the option of failure.
It reminds me of the other story mentioned about Marshall Field after the Great Chicago Fire.
Yes. That's a great contrast.
The store is just smoke and ruins, right?
Right.
And other merchants are saying, let's get out of Chicago, rebuild somewhere easier.
But Field stands there, points to the rubble, and declares something like, gentlemen, on this exact spot, I will build the world's greatest store no matter how many times it burns down.
And he did it.
He did. And the source uses this to highlight that difference again. The burning desire to achieve that specific goal right there versus seeking the easier option. That's the split between success and failure, it argues.
Like Barnes waiting 5 years versus someone else who might have just given up after a few months.
Exactly. It's the difference between wishing things were better and being absolutely consumed by the need to make them better.
Okay, so the power of this intense, definite desire is clear from these stories. But how does the source suggest someone actually, gets that kind of desire? Especially if the goal is something tangible, like money.
Well, it gets quite practical here. It flat out says, wishing for money won't bring it. Wishing for anything won't.
Right?
What works, according to the text, is desiring it so intensely that it becomes an obsession. and combining that with definite plans and persistent action.
And it actually lays out steps, doesn't it? A method.
It does. 6 specific practical steps. And it claims this method was validated by big names like Andrew Carnegie and even Thomas Edison for achieving any definite goal, starting with wealth accumulation.
Okay, let's hear them. What are the 6 steps?
All right. Step 1. Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire.
Exact amount, not just a lot.
No, specificity is key. The text mentions there's a psychological power to being definite, so not plenty of money, but a precise figure.
Okay, step 1, exact amount. What's next?
Step 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for that money.
Ah, the value proposition.
Precisely. The source explicitly states there is no such reality as something for nothing. You have to offer something of value.
Makes sense. Step 3.
Establish a definite date by which you intend to possess.
Don't wait for perfect conditions. Just start. Okay, 4 steps down.
Step 5. Write it all down. A clear, concise statement covering the amount, the time limit, what you'll give in return, and a description of your plan.
Got it. Write it out. And the last step.
Step 6. This one's interesting. Read your written statement aloud twice every day. Once just before bed and once right after you get up in the morning.
Okay, read it twice a day.
But here's the crucial part, and the text emphasizes this heavily, like in all caps. As you read, see, and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money.
Wow. So it's not just reading, it's visualization, emotion.
Exactly. It's about using your imagination to make the end result feel absolutely real right now in the present moment. You have to see it, feel it, believe it as if it's already happened.
That sounds intense.
It is. The source argues that only people who develop what it calls money consciousness ever accumulate great wealth. And that consciousness means your mind is so saturated with the desire, so focused, that you can genuinely see yourself already having achieved the goal.
So it requires what? A strong imagination and the ability to really work yourself up into that white heat of desire, as it says, to truly believe it's coming.
Yes, absolutely. Which leads perfectly into the next idea the source talks about. Practical dreamers.
Practical dreamers. Okay, what does that mean?
The text suggests that, essentially, all great leaders, all people who've achieved massive success or fortunes, were dreamers.
Right.
But crucially, they weren't just dreamers. They didn't just sit around wishing. They were practical dreamers. They backed up their dreams with that intense desire we've been talking about, and with concrete action.
So the dream is the starting point, but desire and action make it real.
Exactly. The source puts it bluntly. If you can't first see great riches or whatever your goal is in your imagination, you're never going to see it in your bank account or your life.
And these practical dreamers, they're the ones who can take these like intangible ideas or opportunities.
Yeah, these unseen forces, yeah.
And somehow convert them into physical reality, like buildings, technology.
Exactly. Skyscrapers, cities, cars, industries, they all started as a dream in someone's mind, backed by desire and action. The source also adds a note for today's dreamers. Tolerance and an open mind are pretty much essential.
Why is that?
Because being afraid of new ideas or dismissing things just because they're different will absolutely hold you back from recognizing or creating opportunities.
That makes sense. Does it give examples of these practical dreamers?
Oh yeah, quite a list. Think about Columbus. He dreamed of an unknown world.
And found it.
Right. Copernicus, dreaming of multiple worlds, and he revealed them through science.
Henry Ford, dreaming of a horseless carriage, even though he started poor and lacked formal education.
And he put the world on wheels, didn't he? Then there's Thomas Edison, dreaming of an electric light.
And failing how many times?
Over 10,000 times, according to the text, but he didn't quit. The source makes a point. Practical dreamers do not QEIT.
That's powerful. Who else? Lincoln.
Lincoln, dreaming of freedom for slaves and putting that dream into action despite incredible opposition. The Wright brothers, dreaming of human flight when everyone thought it was impossible.
And Marconi.
Marconi, yeah. He dreamed of harnessing the invisible forces of the ether for wireless communication, connecting the world without wires.
And wasn't he initially thought to be? Well, crazy.
Completely. The text mentions his own friends were so concerned they actually had him taken in for a psychological examination.
Unbelievable. But he persisted.
He did. And fortunately, the source suggests the world has become maybe a little more open-minded.
It's more willing now to reward dreamers who bring forward genuinely new ideas.
As it says, the greatest achievement was, at first and for a time, but a dream.
Exactly. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. Powerful stuff.
But the path isn't always easy, right? The text talks about adversity, too.
Yeah, it doesn't shy away from that. It acknowledges that, hardship, struggle, even heartbreak are often part of the journey.
And sometimes a crisis can be a turning point. That's the idea. A major crisis can sometimes force you to dig deep and connect with your other self, that hidden reserve of strength you didn't know you had.
So instead of letting misfortune crush you,
You can use imagination and desire to transmute it, to turn negative emotions like disappointment or grief into fuel for constructive, creative work, rather than letting them lead to destructive paths.
are there examples of this transmutation?
Several powerful ones. John Bunyan, thrown in prison for his beliefs. Instead of despairing, he used his imagination and discovered his genius as a writer, producing Pilgrim's Progress.
Thomas Edison again, with his failures leading to discovery.
Charles Dickens, supposedly transmuting the pain of a lost first love into the emotional depth of his novels, like David Copperfield.
Helen Keller, overcoming deafness, blindness, muteness to become an influential writer.
Robert Burns, rising from poverty and illiteracy, channeling his life and emotions into poetry that still resonates. Booker T. Washington, born into slavery, becoming a major leader, known for his tolerance and vision.
And artists like Beethoven composing masterpieces while deaf. Milton writing epic poetry while blind.
Exactly. All examples the source suggests of people translating their inner visions, their dreams, often amidst adversity, into organized thought and lasting creations. The message seems to be, kindle hope, faith, courage, tolerance. And when you're truly ready for your opportunity, it says, it will appear.
That word again, ready. It keeps coming back to that, doesn't it? The difference between just wishing and actually being ready.
Absolutely fundamental. The text insists there's a huge gap between wishing for something and being ready to receive it.
And readiness equals belief.
That's the core of it. You're not ready, it argues, until you genuinely believe you can acquire it. Not just hope, not just wish, but believe. That state of mind is everything. And open-mindedness and faith are presented as non-negotiable for getting to that state of belief.
There was a poem included in the source that really seemed to capture this.
Ah, yes, that's a very striking poem. It goes something like,
I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more.
however, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store.
For life is a just employer. He gives you what you ask.
But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task.
I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn, dismayed.
That any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid.
Wow. That really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It really does. The implication is stark. Life gives you what you demand, what you believe you're worth, what you're truly ready for. You set your own wage through your level of belief and desire.
Which brings us to maybe the most detailed and arguably the most incredible example in the whole chapter. The story about the author's own son, Blair.
Yes. This story is presented as the ultimate proof, almost, of desire's power over seemingly impossible circumstances.
So Blair was born differently.
He was born without any external physical signs of ears, just nothing there. And the initial doctor's opinion was devastating. Likely deaf, probably mute for life.
Unimaginable.
But the father, the author himself, just refused to accept it. He made a quiet, internal decision. He cultivated this incredibly intense, burning desire that his son would hear, would speak.
He just decided it would be so.
He did. He held this deep conviction that limitations are mostly self-imposed or accepted from others. And he set out to basically transplant his own burning desire into his son's mind.
How did he even approach that?
His strategy was essentially belief-driven. Fill the child's mind constantly with the desire to hear, and trust that nature, as the source puts it, would somehow figure out a way to make it reality, even if science couldn't explain how. He consciously put reason aside and leaned on desire backed by faith.
Did they see any signs it was working?
They did see glimmers, tiny indications of hearing as the boy grew. And then came that amazing moment with the Victrola, the old record player.
What happened?
The child instinctively clamped his teeth onto the wood of the machine while it was playing. And they realized later this was bone conduction, sound vibrations traveling through the jawbone. They also discovered he could hear quite clearly if the father spoke with his lips touching the mastoid bone right behind where the ear would be, or at the base of the brainstem.
So they found ways to communicate, to bypass the lack of ears?
Yes, and the father used these methods relentlessly, especially at bedtime. Telling stories, yes, to build imagination and self-reliance, but also, critically, embedding that burning desire to hear. and framing the lack of ears not as a defect, but as potential asset.
An asset? How?
Well, at first the father admits he didn't know how it would be an asset, but he held that belief firmly. He told the boy things like, "Your affliction will be a great asset. It'll make teachers pay special attention. It might give you an edge selling newspapers." He was deliberately planting these ideas.
Selling the idea that the handicap was actually an advantage.
Exactly. And remarkably, the boy's hearing did seem to improve over time, bit by bit.
And the newspaper story.
Ah, yeah, that's telling. At age 7, Blair wants to sell papers. Borrows 6 cents from the housekeeper, buys papers, sells them, reinvests his tiny profit, and ends the day with 42 cents clear.
A little entrepreneur.
Right. And the parents' reactions were completely different. The mother cried, terrified for her little deaf boy out in the world.
Understandable.
But the father, he laughed with joy. He didn't see a vulnerable child. He saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant businessman whose stock, as he put it, had just soared. And that resourcefulness stuck with Blair.
Did they consider special schools for the deaf?
They did, and there was pressure to do so. But they made a firm decision. No. No deaf school, no learning sign language. They were absolutely determined he should live a normal life, interact with normal children, and force himself to develop lip reading and whatever hearing he could muster.
A controversial choice, probably.
Highly controversial, the text implies. But they stuck to it, driven by that desire for normalcy.
So when did the big breakthrough happen?
It happened much later, when Blair was in college. Years after an operation had confirmed there was no natural hearing apparatus, he came across a new electrical hearing aid. Tried it almost on a whim.
Oh.
And suddenly, his world exploded with sound. He described it as entering a changed world. He could hear his mother's voice clearly for the first time, professors' lectures, the radio, movies. He could converse normally.
Must have been overwhelming.
Totally. He was so thrilled he wrote this incredibly enthusiastic letter to the hearing aid manufacturer.
Which led to?
An invitation to visit their headquarters in New York. And while he was there, something clicked. A powerful impulse of thought, the text calls it.
What was the thought?
He realized he could use his own unique story overcoming deafness to help millions of other hard-of-hearing people.
Wow.
He saw how his affliction could become his greatest asset. He decided right then to dedicate his life to serving the hard of hearing. He quickly analyzed the company's marketing, drew up a 2-year plan, and they hired him on the spot to implement it.
Amazing. Turning it all around.
And it gets even more profound. Later, the father visited a school where deaf mutes were being taught to hear and speak, using the very same principles of instilling desire and belief that he had used intuitively with Blair years earlier.
Confirmation of his approach.
And a specialist, Dr. Voorhees, examined Blair again later. Confirmed. Still no sign of natural hearing equipment. Yet Blair heard and spoke exceptionally well. The doctor was apparently just astonished.
So, what was the father's final conclusion about how this happened?
His belief, deeply held, was that his own intense desire, persistently communicated, combined with Blair's eventual acceptance and internalization of that desire and belief, somehow compelled nature herself to build a bridge of silence, to create a pathway for hearing through means science couldn't fully explain.
The little white lies became truth.
Exactly. The handicap genuinely became his greatest asset, leading to a life of service and meaningful work. The source presents this as the ultimate testament to the power of a burning desire.
It highlights the 3 elements: the father's intense desire, the persistent communication, and the son's eventual belief.
And the implication is powerful. If nature can bend to desire like this, what chance do mere human obstacles or opinions have against a truly burning desire backed by faith?
So, wrapping this all up, the core message from this chapter seems incredibly focused.
Yeah, it really hammers it home. Any significant undertaking, whatever it is, must start with an intense, burning desire for something definite.
And it suggests there's almost a kind of principle embedded in strong desire. A mental chemistry, it calls it.
Right, something that just refuses to recognize impossibility, refuses to accept failure.
It describes the power of the mind here as strange and imponderable, using everything around it, circumstances, people, things, to somehow transform that desire into reality.
And it admits, science hasn't fully cracked how this works. It remains somewhat mysterious.
So we've really explored this idea that a definite burning desire, backed up by unwavering belief and a concrete plan, is presented here as the absolute foundation for achievement, way beyond just wishing.
Absolutely. We've seen it play out in stories of business ambition, overcoming incredible physical odds, and even creative genius born from adversity.
This deep dive really leaves you thinking, if the source is right, and even nature can respond to this intense desire and belief, maybe the obstacles we face in our own lives are less solid than they seem?
Definitely gives you pause. And perhaps a final thought to leave you with, circling back to that poem.
Right.
If life truly is a just employer, paying you exactly what you ask for, provided you're willing to do the work, the question becomes, what wage are you currently bargaining for?